The market was loud, crowded, and full of color. Creatures of all kinds moved through the narrow streets, selling and shouting. Some wore shiny armor. Others were wrapped in cloth, but no one looked down at the dirty ground near the trash bins. There, a small alien girl sat with her knees pulled to her chest. Her hair was tangled, her clothes were torn, and her skin looked pale, almost sick. Her big yellow eyes followed every food cart that passed. Every time someone dropped a crumb, her hands moved quickly. Trying to catch it, they laughed at her. Some called her a stray beast, others a street rat. One trader threw a bone near her just to watch her crawl for it. "Look at that thing," he chuckled. "She thinks she's people." The alien girl didn't speak. She just stared at the food. Then looked away slowly. She was too weak to cry, too tired to beg. She hadn't eaten real food in many days. The paper she chewed yesterday had no taste, no life, but her stomach didn't care. It twisted and growled. She held it with both hands, hoping the pain would stop. Suddenly, something strange happened. A tall human man stood at a stall nearby, buying tools for his ship. His name was Callan, and he had sharp eyes that noticed small things as he waited for the seller to wrap his purchase. He turned his head and saw her. For a moment, their eyes met. Her eyes were wide, tired, and afraid. She looked down quickly. Like a creature caught doing something wrong, Callan frowned, not in anger, but in thought. He took his tools and walked away. But something stayed in his mind. Her eyes wouldn't leave his thoughts. That night, as he sat in his small room above the ship docks, he couldn't eat his dinner. The taste was fine. But he kept seeing those yellow eyes, the way she looked at food like it was treasure. He sighed, pushed the plate away, and made a decision the next day. Callan returned to the market. This time, he brought something with him, a small food box. Filled with warm rice and soft bread, he searched the same alley near the trash bins, and there she was, sitting just like before. Weaker than yesterday. He walked toward her slowly and sat down on the ground. A few feet away, the alien girl looked at him with fear and confusion. Her body shook, ready to run if he made a move. Callan didn't say much. He just opened the food box and placed it gently on the ground. Then, in a soft voice, he whispered, "You can eat with me." She didn't believe him. Her kind had been tricked before. I heard food and then beaten, some even taken away, never to return. So she didn't move, not yet, but the smell was too strong. Her body acted before her mind. She crawled forward, slowly, as if crossing a minefield. Her hands touched the box, then pulled it close. She took the first bite like it might vanish. And then another and another. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. Her eyes never left Callan's face, trying to read him. Trying to understand why he gave her food and didn't ask for anything back. People walked by and stared. A few laughed again. One human shouted, "You feeding that thing? Might as well raise a sewer rat." Callan didn't reply. He just sat there quietly, watching her eat. His expression calm, his mind focused. She finished the food in minutes and licked the box clean. Then she looked at him, not as a human, not as a threat, but as something new, something unknown. A question formed in her eyes. But her mouth didn't speak it. Her voice had forgotten how to work. Callan stood up and placed a small blanket beside her. He gave her a quiet nod, then turned and walked away. He didn't know if she would follow, didn't expect anything at all, but that night, as he came home, he saw something at his door, curled up beside the frame, wrapped in the same blanket. Was the alien girl, fast asleep, like a kitten in the cold? He stood there in silence, the stars blinking above. Then he opened the door and left it just a little open. Inside, the warm lights waited, and so did a second plate of food, just in case. The morning air was quiet. Soft light touching the walls of the dockhouses. Callan opened his door slowly, not wanting to scare her. But the alien girl was already awake, sitting up with sleepy eyes. Her blanket wrapped tightly around her. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She only looked at him like a creature, unsure if she was safe or still dreaming. Callan nodded once and stepped back, leaving the door open wider. Then he walked into his small kitchen and began to prepare food. Inside, the place smelled warm and clean. A tiny stove buzzed softly, and something sizzled in the pan. The alien girl stayed at the doorway, 1 foot inside, 1 still outside. Her eyes scanned the room, walls filled with ship parts, toolboxes, and a single soft chair. She walked in slowly, step by step, her movements quiet, like a cat in an unfamiliar place. Callan placed a tray on the small table and gestured with his hand. "It's for you," he said gently. She stared at the food and then at him. Her eyes still didn't trust, but her stomach didn't wait. She climbed onto the chair and sat cross-legged. Pulling the plate toward her, she ate fast. Like someone afraid the food would disappear, crumbs fell to the table, but she didn't care. She licked her fingers and looked at Callan, confused. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice cracked like old paper, dry and unused. Callan blinked. Surprised that she spoke, he replied softly, "Because you were hungry?" She didn't answer. But something in her face changed. Her eyes weren't as hard now. They blinked slower. Her shoulders relaxed a little. She pushed the empty plate forward, unsure what to do next. Callan stood and got her a small metal cup with water. She drank it all in one breath and held the cup with both hands like it was made of gold. Then she pointed at herself and said, "Lou?" "Ma," he smiled. "Luma," he repeated. "Is that your name?" She nodded slowly. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. The rest of the day passed quietly. Luma stayed inside, curled up near the heater, watching Callan fix a small drone. She didn't speak much, just watched, her eyes full of curiosity, but also caution. When someone knocked at the door, she jumped and hid behind the chair. Callan opened the door halfway and spoke with a neighbor, keeping his body between the visitor and Luma's hiding spot. After the man left, Luma came out slowly, her eyes wide with fear. "Is someone coming to take me?" she asked in a whisper. Callan shook his head. "No one's taking you," he promised. "You're safe here." That night, she didn't ask for food, but when he placed the plate near the heater, she ate again, slower this time, like she believed it would still be there. She watched Callan as he ate across the room, copying the way he used the fork and napkin. Later, Callan made a small bedroll for her beside the heater. He offered the blanket, but she hesitated. Instead, she pointed to the door there, she said. Callan blinked. "You want to sleep by the door?" She nodded. He didn't argue. He understood. Maybe that spot gave her comfort, the place where she first felt safe, so he placed the blanket there. And Luma lay down, curling up without a word. Hours passed. And Callan sat in his chair, watching the stars outside the window. He thought about what she'd been through. What kind of world would let a child starve while people laughed? Suddenly, a quiet voice spoke behind him. "I was in a cage." Callan turned. Surprised, Luma sat up against the door, her face half hidden. "In shadow, they put us in cages because we looked like pets," she said. "But I wasn't a pet. I was born free." Callan's heart tightened. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing, just listened. Luma continued. "They took my sister," her voice shaking. "They said she was marketable. I wasn't." She looked down at her hands. "I ran away, but they laughed. They always laugh." Then she looked up at him. "But you didn't." Callan knelt beside her. He didn't touch her, just sat near. "You're safe now," he said. "No one will cage you again." Luma looked at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. She lay back down and pulled the blanket. Over her shoulders, this time, she didn't tremble. As Callan returned to his chair, he saw something different in her eyes, something small, but real. A flicker of trust. Outside, the stars still shone cold and distant, but inside that room, one hungry soul had been fed, and one lost child had taken her first step toward healing. The station lights dimmed as night settled over the dock city. Outside, the wind howled between metal buildings, carrying the smell of fuel and fried food. Inside Callan's room, it was quiet and warm, the heater buzzing softly, filling the space. With a gentle hum, Luma lay curled up by the door. Wrapped in her blanket like a cocoon, her breathing was slow and steady. But her eyes remained half open, watching the door as if it might open to danger at any second. Callan sat in his chair, watching her from across the room. He tried to focus on repairing a small navigation unit, but his hands moved slower than usual. His mind kept drifting back to her, this tiny alien girl who once shook in fear. Now sleeping on his floor like she belonged there, he remembered the way she said her name, the way she talked about the cage and her sister. The pain in her voice had stayed with him like a cold stone in his chest. Luma moved slightly in her sleep, making a soft, whimpering sound. Callan stood up and walked over. Quietly, he knelt beside her, careful not to scare her. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're safe." Her eyes opened slowly, blinking up at him. For a second, she looked confused, then calm. She didn't speak. But she didn't pull away either. He gently placed another small pillow under her head and returned to his chair. Outside the window, a transport ship roared by, shaking the walls slightly. Luma didn't flinch this time. She was getting used to the sound, to the space to him. The next morning, Callan woke up to the sound of soft movement. He looked down and saw Luma sitting at the table, her feet dangling off the chair. She held one of his old tool manuals and flipped through the pages, even though she clearly didn't understand the words. "Morning," Callan said, walking over, "Hungry?" She nodded, not smiling, but her eyes weren't afraid. That was enough. He made her breakfast: simple toast and protein cubes. Luma chewed slowly now, not like the first time. She looked at him between bites, then pointed at the tools on the shelf. "You fix machines?" She asked. "Yeah," Callan replied. "Starships, mostly." She nodded thoughtfully. "My sister. She liked to fix things too." Callan didn't ask more. He knew the pain was still close to her heart. Instead, he brought out an old broken communicator and placed it on the table. "Want to try fixing this?" he asked with a soft smile. Luma looked at it, then at him. Her small fingers touched the device gently. "Okay," she whispered. They worked side by side. Callan showed her how the circuits worked, how the wires connected. Luma learned quickly. Too quickly for a normal child. She had a sharp mind, her hands delicate but precise. Time passed, and the sun rose higher. A knock came at the door suddenly, and Luma froze. Her body went stiff, like prey sensing a predator. Callan walked to the door calmly and opened it just a crack. Outside stood a security officer, tall and cold. "We received reports of a non-registered alien seen near the markets." The officer said, "Any chance you've seen anything unusual?" Callan shook his head. "No, haven't seen anything strange." The officer glanced past him into the room. "You live alone?" he asked. "Always have." Callan lied smoothly. The officer narrowed his eyes but nodded. "If you see anything, report it." Callan closed the door slowly, his face calm, but his heart racing. Behind him, Luma had hidden under the table, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. "It's okay," Callan said. Crouching down beside her, "He's gone." Luma didn't speak, but tears filled her eyes. She reached out suddenly and grabbed his sleeve, holding it tightly like a lifeline. Callan sat with her under the table until her breathing slowed. Later, that evening, he made a quiet decision. He pulled an old crate from the storage room and began turning it into a small bed for Luma, complete with a mattress and a curtain she could pull for privacy. He even added a small light so she wouldn't sleep in the dark when she saw it. She didn't say anything at first. She walked over, touched the blanket, and then looked at Callan. No cage. She asked quietly, "No cage?" He said firmly, "Just a bed." She nodded and sat inside, curling up in the middle like a cat claiming its new spot. But when night came and Callan turned off the lights, he noticed something Luma wasn't in. The bed she had moved again back to her place near the door. Curled up exactly as before, the blanket tucked under her chin. Her face peaceful, Callan smiled faintly. He didn't question it. Maybe the doorway still felt like safety. Maybe it reminded her of the first moment someone saw her as more than a creature. He turned off the lights, sat back in his chair, and whispered into the quiet room, "Good night, Luma," from the door. A soft whisper replied, "Good night, Callan." And for the first time in years, both of them slept through the night. Without fear, asterisk days passed quietly. The dock city stayed, loud and busy. But inside Callan's small room, peace began to grow. Luma no longer flinched at every sound. She no longer jumped at shadows or knocked over chairs trying to hide. She still slept by the door, but now she smiled sometimes. And once, just once, she even laughed. It was a short sound. Small and broken, but Callan heard it, and it stayed in his heart like a gift. One morning, Callan noticed bruises on Luma's thin arms, dark purple marks hidden under her sleeve. "Who did this to you?" he asked gently. She looked away before. She said, back then, he didn't press further. Instead, he stood and said, "Let's go somewhere today." Luma's eyes widened. "Outside?" She whispered. He nodded. "Just a short trip." She followed him nervously through the back alleys, her hood pulled low over her face. Callan led her to an old friend, Dr. Mira, who ran a quiet medic shop near the edge of the docks. She owed Callan a favor. And more importantly, she didn't ask questions she didn't want answers to. Inside the clinic, Luma sat on a bench, eyes scanning everything, ready to bolt at the slightest threat. Mira walked in, her eyes kind but sharp. She looked at Luma, then at Callan, and gave a small nod. "She's hurt," Callan said. "Old wounds too." Mira examined Luma slowly. Carefully, her touch was gentle, her words softer than wind. "She's underfed," she said. "Bruised ribs, healing burns. And something else." She took a small device and scanned Luma's neck. The screen beeped red. Myra's face darkened. "She's marked," Myra whispered. "Biotagged." Callan stiffened. "What kind of tag?" Myra looked at him, her voice quiet. "Slave tag." Luma pulled her knees to her chest and shook her head fast. "No cage," she cried. "No cage." Callan knelt beside her. "You're not going back." "I promise," he said. "But we need to remove the tag so they can't find you." Mira nodded and prepared the tools. "It'll hurt a little," she warned, "but I'll make it quick." Luma gritted her teeth and held Callan's hand tightly. Her eyes didn't leave his for a second when the tag was pulled out. She didn't scream, just tears rolled down. Her face, silent and steady, afterwards. Mira placed the small biochip in a lead case and handed it to Callan. "Destroy it far from here," she said. "If they find it, they might track it. If they find her, she won't survive." Callan thanked her and took Luma home. She didn't speak on the way, but she never let go of his sleeve, not even once, that night. Luma sat by the window instead of the door. She looked up at the stars with soft, glowing eyes. Callan sat nearby, cleaning his tools, but watching her from the corner of his eye. "I had a sister," she whispered. "She was taken because she looked pretty. I looked wild, so they chained me and laughed." Callan said nothing. He just let her talk. "She tried to fight for me," Luma said, but they hit her until she stopped moving. I don't know if she's dead or still in a cage. Her voice broke, and she wrapped her arms around her legs, curling into herself like a fading flower. I stopped speaking after that, she said. I thought if I stayed quiet, no one would take me too. Callan reached over and placed a blanket around her shoulders. You don't have to be quiet here, he said. No one's taking you again. Not ever. That night, someone knocked on the door again. A soft knock, slow and spaced out. Callan stood quickly. Luma slipped back to her corner behind the crates. He opened the door halfway. Outside stood a small boy. No older than 10, dirty and barefoot. Mister, the boy said. The guards were asking about you and a non-human girl. They paid a trader for info. Callan gave the boy a few credits and closed the door. His face was calm, but inside, a storm had begun. They were getting closer. He turned to Luma. You may have to run again, he said softly, but not alone this time. I'll go with you. Luma stared at him, unsure if he meant it. But Callan smiled and said, You're not a burden. You're not a secret. You're someone worth protecting. She walked to him, slow and shaky, and took his hand. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me not as a thing, but as me. That night, she didn't sleep by the door. She slept near the window, still watching the stars, but no longer afraid of the dark. And somewhere out there, in the shadows and whispers of the dock city, the search had begun, but so had her healing. The stars above the dock city twinkled like sparks on metal. But danger was growing in the shadows below. The guards had names now, maps, and blurry footage of a man feeding an unregistered alien girl. Whispers moved through alleys like smoke, soft but poisonous, inside the small room above the docks. Luma was learning how to fix wires. Her small fingers moved carefully, her face focused. She no longer asked if she could help, she simply did. Callan watched her work and felt pride, but also fear. Every moment together felt more like family. And that meant more to lose. That evening, a strange sound echoed near the back wall. Luma froze. Callan grabbed his scanner and checked the feed. Someone had tried to access the door, but failed. Then came the soft noise of retreating boots. Fast and light, they're watching, Callan whispered. Luma nodded, her face pale again. She had known this feeling before, being hunted, being tracked, and now it had returned. That night, Luma didn't sleep. She sat near the window again. Holding a tool in her hand like a weapon, Callan packed supplies quietly, stuffing food packs, credits, and clothes into a hidden travel bag. We leave tomorrow, he said, before they surround us. Luma didn't argue. Her eyes stayed open until morning. When the sun rose, they left through the back door. Slipping through the metal alleys like ghosts, they moved fast, but the station was awake now. Patrols blocked roads, scanners lit up walls. Callan led Luma into a scrapyard, rows of broken ships and forgotten cargo units stacked like tombstones. It smelled of oil, rust, and old memories. They crawled into a broken freighter. Its walls burned from old battles. Inside, it was quiet and dark. Luma sat with her back to the wall, breathing hard. This place is like the cage, she whispered. Callan reached into his bag and pulled out the old blanket. He wrapped it around her shoulders, but this time, no one's locking the door, he said. We're just hiding, not trapped. Suddenly, voices echoed nearby, guards, sharp and alert. Search everything, one barked. The alien girl is small, fast, and dangerous. Luma's eyes widened, and she pressed closer to the metal wall. Callan moved beside her, holding his breath. They stayed silent as boots crunched outside. The freighter, a scanner light flashed through the cracked wall. Just missing Luma's face, Callan whispered, "Close your eyes," and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. She obeyed without question, trusting him even in fear. Minutes passed. Like hours, the guards moved on. their voices fading. Callan and Luma stayed inside for a long time after. Afraid to move, afraid to breathe, when it was finally safe, they slipped out and made their way to the hidden tunnel behind the scrapyard. It led to the edge of the lower docks where smugglers, scavengers, and people who didn't ask questions came and went without notice. They found shelter in a storage unit, small and cold, but safer now. Luma leaned against the wall, her legs shaking from exhaustion. "I can't keep running," she whispered. "They'll always find me." Callan knelt in front of her, his hands resting gently on her arms. "Then we stop running," he said. "We find a way off this station, somewhere no one knows your name, somewhere you're not a fugitive, but just a girl." "But I'm not just a girl," she said softly. "I'm broken, unwanted." "No," Callan replied firmly. "You're brave, you're smart, and you're stronger than anyone I've met, and you're not unwanted." She stared at him, her eyes full of emotion she didn't know how to name. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then she leaned forward and rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for still being here." Callan held her gently, his heart full of both hope and fear. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew he wouldn't leave her behind. That night, he contacted an old friend, Mika, smuggler with a heart hidden under layers of sarcasm and space dust. She owed Callan from a job long ago, and when she saw Luma's face on the screen, her expression changed. "You really got yourself into something," Mika said. "They're calling her property of the Enclave. You know what that means?" Callan nodded. "Yeah," he said. "It means they won't stop until she's caught or dead." "I'll help," Mika said. "But the price isn't cheap. You owe me 3 favors after this. Deal?" Callan replied without hesitation. "When and where?" "Midnight, loading bay 47. She said, 'Bring no one else and tell the girl to stay out of sight.'" As the connection ended, Luma looked at Callan. "Is it real?" "A ship?" she asked. He nodded. "It's real." She closed her eyes and exhaled. "Then I'll follow you," she said, "even into space." Callan smiled, tired but determined. "Then let's get ready, because tonight they wouldn't run to hide, they would run to be free. The night was colder than usual. Clouds of smoke floated across the lower docks, thick with engine fumes and secrets. Callan and Luma stayed low, moving like shadows through the gaps between cargo crates and broken ship parts. Bay 47 was just ahead, a large, rust-covered hangar with a cracked roof and blinking warning lights. It looked abandoned, but Callan knew better. Smugglers never used clean places. Dirty ones were safer. Quieter, forgotten by patrols, Luma clung close to his side, wearing a hood that almost swallowed her whole. Her breathing was fast, but she didn't complain. Her eyes kept scanning everything, alert like a wild creature waiting for danger. Inside Bay 47, a small ship waited near the far wall. Its hull was scarred, paint chipped off in layers, but its engines glowed faintly with life. Standing next to it was Mika, tall woman with cybernetic arms and a grin that said she'd broken every law at least once. "Took your time, Mika," said as Callan approached. "I almost left without you." Callan gave her a tired look. "You wouldn't leave a favor unpaid?" Mika's eyes landed on Luma. "So that's the girl, huh? Doesn't look like trouble, but I know better." Luma said nothing. She simply stared at the ship like it was a dream she was afraid to touch. "She doesn't talk much to strangers," Callan said, "but she's fast, smart, and worth more." "Then any credits?" Mika nodded. "Get on board. We leave in 5." As they walked up the ramp, an alarm suddenly blared across the bay. Red lights lit the walls, and a robotic voice echoed through the air. "Unauthorized launch detected. All units respond to Bay 47. "Damn it," Mika muttered. Running for the cockpit, "They must have traced your message." Callan grabbed Luma's hand and pulled her inside. "We're not stopping now." He said, "Not this time." Guards poured into the bay with rifles raised, shouting for them to stand down. Mika slammed buttons on the console. "Engines at 70. Almost there." One of the guards fired, and a spark exploded near the door. Luma screamed and dropped to the floor. Callan threw himself in front of her, shielding her with his body. Mika growled, "Strap in, we're punching through." The ship lifted off the ground, metal groaning under the pressure. The guards kept firing, bullets bouncing off the lower hull. One managed to hit a stabilizer cable, causing the ship to tilt sharply. "Hold on," Mika shouted as she pushed the throttle forward. The ship roared as it surged forward. Crashing through crates and metal beams, the blast door at the end of the hangar began to close. "Slow but steady. We won't make it," Callan said. "Yes, we will," Mika replied, teeth clenched. "This bucket may be ugly, but she bites hard." The engine screamed as the ship slammed through the shrinking gap. Scraps of metal scratched the sides. One wing clipped the edge, but they were out. They soared into the dark sky above the docks. Chased by patrol ships and flashing warning lights, Luma stared through the viewport, her hands shaking as the city below became smaller and smaller. Tracking lock detected, the ship's AI warned, "Enemy vessels in pursuit." Callan turned to Luma. "Can you help?" he asked. "You fixed my drone, can you reroute power?" Luma blinked, fear mixing with focus. She nodded and ran to the side panel. Her small fingers flew across wires, sparks flying. "More power to rear thrusters," she said. "Shut off cabin lights to feed core." Mika looked back, impressed. "Where'd you find this kid?" "I didn't find her," Callan said. "She found me." The ship shot forward, outrunning the smaller patrol crafts. But one remained larger, stronger, and armed with disruptor missiles. "Brace for impact." Mika shouted. The ship shook as a blast hit near the tail. Luma was thrown across the cabin. Callan caught her mid-air, pulling her close. "I'm fine," she whispered. "We have to jump." Mika grinned. "Kid's got guts." She pulled lever, and the jump drive roared to life. Coordinates locked in charted moon near Sector 19. The patrol ship fired one last shot. But the jump activated just in time. Light exploded around them. Colors twisted, and then silence. They landed hard on the surface of a quiet green moon. Trees swayed in the wind. The sky above was calm. No ships, no noise, just peace. The engines. When quiet, Mika leaned back in her chair. "We made it." Callan looked at Luma, who was now sitting on the floor, breathing slowly. Her eyes were tired, but they held something new relief. He knelt beside her. "You did it," he said. "You helped us escape." She smiled. A real smile this time. "I'm not in a cage anymore." She whispered, "No." Callan replied, "You're free, and on that small, forgotten moon." Surrounded by stars and silence, the girl who was once chained, mocked, and hunted finally began her new life. The green moon was silent, untouched, and peaceful. There were no sirens, no guards, no markets filled with laughter and cruelty. Just soft grass underfoot and blue trees that swayed in slow wind. Luma stepped out of the ship, barefoot. She bent down, touching the ground as if it might vanish. Her eyes were wide, full of wonder. Full of something new, freedom. Callan watched her from the ramp, his arms crossed, tired but calm. Mika leaned against the side of the ship, chewing on a stick. "Of dry root, it ain't pretty," she said, "but it's far enough from trouble." "It's perfect," Callan replied. His voice was soft, like he still couldn't believe they'd made it out alive. They set up camp just beyond a hill, using an old cargo shelter as their base. Solar panels powered lights and heat, and Luma helped carry supplies without being asked. She moved with purpose now, not just to survive, but to belong. That night, they all sat under the open sky. A fire crackled, cooking something warm. Callan stirred the pot while Luma sat beside him, legs folded, eyes fixed on the flames. "Do you think they'll find us here?" she asked. Callan shook his head. "They won't. Mika scrambled our signal trail. We're ghosts now." Luma didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "I still dream about the cage and the laughing." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Dreams can't hurt you anymore," he said, "but real things like this moment can heal you." Mika raised her metal cup. "2 new lives," she said, "and second chances," they all toasted, even Luma. Though she used both hands to lift her tiny cup, her smile that night was small, but real, over the next few days. They built a simple home. Mika stayed long enough to help secure the place, lay defenses, and set a silent beacon only they could track. Then she hugged Luma goodbye. "You're tougher than you look," she said. "Don't let this world change you again." Luma hugged her back, something she'd never done before. "Thank you for flying us through the fire," she said. After Mika left, it was just Callan and Luma. They fell into a rhythm: mornings fixing parts, afternoons planting food packs in the soil, and evenings watching stars without fear. One morning, Callan handed Luma a small carved stone. It had a symbol etched into it, a name from an old Earth language. "This means hope," he said. "You remind me of it." She turned the stone over in her hands. "Luma means light," she whispered. "But it wasn't my real name. They gave it to me in the cage." Callan paused, then asked gently, "Do you want a new one?" Luma looked at the sunrise, then at him. "No," she said slowly, "but I want it to mean something new. So what does it mean now?" He asked. She smiled. "It means I'm not afraid anymore." Days turned to weeks. Luma spoke more now. Asked questions, laughed often. Sometimes she still slept by the door. But more often than not, she curled up near the heater inside her own little room, one Callan built just for her. It had hand-drawn pictures on the wall, tools hanging neatly, and a blanket that smelled like lavender from the plants they'd grown. Her favorite thing was a small wooden sign Callan made that read, "This is my room, not a cage." One evening, rain fell softly outside, tapping against the roof. Luma walked into Callan's room and sat beside him on the floor. She held out an old Dronja picture of 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing under stars. "This is us," she said. "I never thought I'd ever draw something like this." Callan looked at it, his throat tight. "You're a good artist," he said, "and a good fighter, and a good fixer. And what are you?" she asked, grinning. He thought for a moment, then said, "I'm someone lucky enough to meet a girl who changed everything." She leaned against his shoulder, her voice soft. "They used to laugh when I starved," she said, "but you fed me, and now I don't feel small anymore." "You never were small," Callan whispered. "The world just tried to make you feel that way." Outside, the rain stopped, and stars came out again. Luma looked up at them, not with fear, but with dreams. "What now?" she asked. "What do we do with a life like this?" Callan smiled. "We live it," he said, "one day at a time." And so, the girl who once slept beside trash, who was mocked, beaten, and caged, now walked freely on a moon no one had claimed. She was no longer hungry, no longer hunted. She was Lumalite. Hope and healing, and every night she placed the carved stone by her pillow and whispered the same words before sleep. "I'm not in a cage, I'm home." Asterisk.